Welcome back to another episode of Just a Tip, where we say the shit that everyone's thinking but nobody's saying. Today, we have the legend Norman Van Aken on, and this isn't just another chef episode. This is Miami food history sitting at the table. Before every restaurant had a PR team and neon bathroom signs with some globally inspired menu that tastes like it was built in a boardroom, Norman was already blending cultures, ingredients, and stories in a way that actually meant something. He helped put South Florida on the culinary map. He helped define what people now call fusion cuisine, and was part of the whole historic Mango Gang era that made Miami food feel like Miami food. We get into Key West, Old Miami, Coral Gables, Norman's, the evolution of New World Cuisine, and what happens when cooking is treated like an art instead of just another way to charge $28 for a side dish. And the best part is, Norman doesn't talk like someone who's trying to prove he's a legend. He talks like somebody who lived it, studied it, cooked through it, and still truly cares about teaching the next generation. This episode is just a reminder that Miami's food scene didn't just appear out of nowhere. It shows that there was people like Norman that actually built it. This is Just a Tip, Norman Van Aken.
So people always ask me who my Mount Rushmore of chefs is, because I always ask them. Our guest today was very lucky enough to have one of my dreams come true and one off of my Mount Rushmore. The guy has been around longer than most and has seen shit that most probably have or have not. I am super honored to have a man who I may or may have not coined the phrase fusion, and brings and does so much for the community and is a landmark of the South Florida community and the world community. Between the books, the interviews, the restaurants, I am super honored to have my guest and an icon, Norman Van Aken. Norman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Felix.
Thanks for coming
Great
on.
to be here.
Yeah, no, this is, I'm still a little starstruck because, you know, we have, everybody in the community has so much admiration for you and everything that you've done and accomplished that, you know, you really have to like step back and really just take everything in of like what you have done. And, you know, I just really wanted you on the podcast today to really go through the journey, because when you have multiple chefs that come on my show and talk about how you were the inspiration and you were, you know, the driving force of what they do and why they do it, you know, it really tells a great deal about you. So thanks again.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I really just want to start with the journey. So you're originally from Illinois, right? Mm-hmm. Suburbs?
Farm country, adjacent to farm country. We weren't milking cows.
Right.
But the city was an hour to the south, and Wisconsin was a shorter ride than the city by far. It was a great place, very bucolic, you know, trees and lakes, and an innocent childhood up until probably when my parents broke up. Then the childhood sort of began to crash, but not immediately. I had a good teenage time too. And yeah, you know, we did come to Florida as children with our parents. We came to Miami Beach. It was the 50s. And I think in some ways that's what drove me to decide to take a look at Florida again when I got old enough to get out of home. Right. And I'm done with high school and a little bit of college.
Right. And then, so how did culinary, or where did you get your first restaurant job? How did that fall into your lap?
I was fired from being a roofer.
Okay.
For enjoying a rainstorm that stopped our work. Ironically, we were roofing the high school my brother went to, Libertyville, Illinois, and I was doing a lot of shitty jobs. I mean,
Right.
I worked in factories. I worked in the carnival. I worked cutting the lawns on a golf course. I worked selling flowers in Honolulu on the street. A lot of bad jobs. A lot of the factory jobs were probably the worst. No, well, roofer was up there because
Right.
the heat and the dust and the tar and your fingers sticking together from all of it. Well, the rain came one afternoon, and everybody went down the ladders as fast as they could to jump in their shitty cars and their shitty trucks, and I didn't. My shitty car sat over there, but I started rolling around on the grass of the football field, just happy to be away from that roof, away from the heat, away from the smell of the tar. And in my rolling, I ran into my boss's legs.
You ran him over, like kind of.
I was just kind of tumbling, rolling, and suddenly I felt a human form, hit, And I looked up, and he was upside down to me, and through his impenetrable sunglasses, he said, "Van Aken, we don't need your kind around here." And I said, "Well, good. I don't need you either, asshole."
Right.
And I went to my car and patched out of there, happy as could be, until it dawned on me that rent was going to be due in about 2 weeks, and I didn't have more than $30. So I went to a newsstand box, kind of like the New Times boxes
Right.
you see. And there was a thing called the Advertiser, and it wasn't a newspaper that told you the news. It was all about where you could buy a used boat or where you could get a job, or
It's like a classifieds.
A classified.
Right.
Very good. And so I took it home and spread it out on the kitchen table of the farmhouse I was renting with 7 other cats. And I'm like, I don't see shit. I don't know how to do. And then there was one ad that said, "Shorter cook needed, no experience necessary." That's the title of a book. And so I circled it and was like, I don't have any experience, but they're not asking for any. So I went to that restaurant, and it was a restaurant that I went to as a child, as a teenager. I actually went there in my roofing days once. It was a local place, a local diner. And the owner came out, dried his hands on his apron, looked at my application, no resume, and he says, "All right, you can start tomorrow. Be here at 6:30. And I said, "Okay." He goes, $3.25 an hour. I said, "Okay." He says, "You can have lunch." And I said, "Okay." So I drove back to the farmhouse, and I realized I don't get up at 6:30. I don't get up at 5:30. So I went to the hardware store and I bought an alarm clock. Came back, and that's how it started.
Wow.
Flipping
And-
eggs, flipping burgers.
And did you fall in love with it? Or was it just a job for you at the time?
Oh, it was a job for both.
Right.
I loved the language. I loved the food, the smell and the sight of food. This is a diner where there was a window so I could see the people who were sitting at the counter, not in the dining room. But I loved it. But I didn't at all consider it a career. I mean, not even only just $3.25 an hour. Nobody I was around talked about being a chef. There was nothing like the world that came in 15 years or 10 years from that. So it wasn't even a practical issue to talk about being a cook, a chef, or sous chef, whatever. Those terms really didn't have an imprint on me. Even though as a child, I learned, listening to the stories, that I really cared a lot about food and flavors. But as far as the only thing I really wanted to be was a writer or a lyricist for a band, be in a band and write the songs. I was really attracted to songwriters, especially at that age.
Who were some of the guys that you would listen to?
Dylan, of course, but John Prine was especially strong. I liked a lot. Jackson Browne, Chris Christopherson.
Did you ever used to go into Chicago and listen
Yes.
to them live?
Yeah, I did see them in some small clubs, and in one of the clubs, the Quiet Night on Belmont, there was a harmonica player named Corky Siegel, and we loved him. My buddy, my older brother, and I both played harmonica, and seeing Corky was just like, someday that's what we want to do too. But I wanted to write the songs. I was really interested. Even as a 8-year-old, I was reading poems and stories of writers and all of that. So I didn't gravitate toward the idea of being a chef at all. It wasn't I didn't see the creativity in it yet. I replicated the food that other people told me how to make. Right. And that's important. I mean, don't get me wrong. The whole dance that is, the physical skill that it takes to be a short order cook was not lost on me. But fortunately, I had gotten to Key West. I kind of ran off to Key West. My best friend's older brother got arrested for pot, dealing it. And he was due to go to court, and he decided not to, and he went to Key West. I went to a party at the house of the two brothers, one older, one younger. The younger one was my best pal growing up. It was a good party, and but the party ended at 3:00 in the morning or so, and I said, "Where's Steve, the middle brother?"
Right.
He said, "Well, he took off. He went to Key West." And I said, where's Key West? Again. Where's Key West again? And they said, you go to Miami and you keep on going. So I said, that sounds good. It was the end of a really lousy winter. I'd broken up with my girlfriend, and I was just in a malaise frame of mind. And I said, anybody want to go to Key West? And there were two brothers there, the Passion brothers. And I said, what do you think? Go see Steve? And they said, yeah, let's go. I said, when do you want to go? They said, let's go tonight. So we got in their van, scored some energy pills,
Got it.
and got in their van. And 36 hours later, we were pulling into Key West.
At this point,
1971.
oh yeah, I was gonna say, at this point, how long were you working at the diner for?
Let's see. How does it work? I hadn't been working yet at the diner. I went to Key West before I got the job at the diner. So I went to Key West the first time, didn't have the diner
Right.
job. So 71, went to Key West. 72, I ran out of money in Key West. That didn't take long. Came back home, tried to figure it out. How am I
Right.
going to put it together? That's 72 is when I got the job in the diner. I was working in the diner and working to save up what I figured would be enough money, which was $300. And with a buddy, we got what was called a drive-away car. Well, not everybody here will know what that is. So it's when a dealership needs a car moved from one dealership to another dealership. And we somehow found one that wanted to have a car moved from Chicago to Miami.
Right.
So he and I and another buddy got that car, and we drove to Key West. But an important interlude is that while I was working at the diner, the boss asked me one afternoon if I would help him do a party that night. I didn't work nights. I worked days,
Right.
of course. And I said, sure, I'll do it. Will you give me an extra $1 an hour? Which sort of surprises me even to this day because I never asked for more money. And he said, yeah, we'll do that. And I said, okay. So the daytime ladies, they were all ladies that worked on the floor, they left. And the nighttime shift came on. There was not a single male server in this place. To my surprise, one of the servers was really attractive young lady, and she came into the kitchen. She seemed almost to take the door off the hinges with such energy, to drop off some dirty cups and dessert plates and stuff like that. And then she went out the other door just as fast. And I looked at my pal and I said, who was that? And he said, I don't know. Turned out it was Janet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we quickly became attached. And yeah, so she ran away. She quit high school and ran away. And everybody came after me like, why, you long hair, did you make that happen? I'm like, I'm still at work. I'm still here. I'm not the one. I don't even know where she is. The last I heard, she was going to Arizona.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, fuck you. and your Mr. Amsler, maiden name, Mr. Amsler's got a shotgun. If you want to get smart with us, you better tell us where she is.
Right.
I do not know. And I didn't know. I didn't know at all until I got a postcard from a motel in Fort Lauderdale that this is where she was.
Right.
And so that was just before we picked up the car to go to Miami to drop off that car. We got to Fort Lauderdale, and I said to my buddies, I said, I need to stop here and go find this motel. And they said, we got to have this car to the dealership before they close at 8 o'clock. I said, relax, go have a beer, take it easy. They dropped me off, and there's no phone. There's nothing. There's no way I know how to get a hold of her. But I see a maid, and I said, I'm looking for a girl named Janet. And she's like, no habla. And I said, Juanita? And she makes a sign like she's not very tall, right? I said, that's her, right here. So she knocks on a door, and the door opens up, and the bed is as big as the room, but that means very small.
Right.
And Janet was there with 2 other maids. And I said, take a walk with me. I want to go down by the ocean here. And so she did. And I was like, okay. So the guys came back, picked me up. We dropped the car off at the dealership, and then we got a Greyhound bus, and went through down the Keys to see what we could see. And I got a job working in a bar called the Midget, which was open 24 hours. And the boss, whose name was Budman, well, his nickname was Budman, and he said, you don't have much experience. I said, barely any at all. He said, that's okay. You're working the midnight shift. These guys will be so fucked up when they eat this food, they won't know the difference.
Right.
I said, well, that's fine with me. So he gave me the job, and there was a musical component to that place. There was, he'd have musicians that would play in the courtyard. There was no roof on the place. It was all open air.
Right.
And Jimmy Buffett was one of the people playing, but nobody knew Jimmy yet. Jimmy got to Key West like 6 months after me. And he was playing barefoot, 6-string underneath this big banyan tree. And it was like, it was entertaining, but there was no context for this guy was going to be, world famous in 15 years or something like that.
Did you have a feeling that maybe, was there anything special about him, or no, he was just like another great musician? Or
He was another strummer in town. To me, I was much more into electrified blues. I mean, I did love the songwriters we talked about earlier, but I thought it was pleasant, but I didn't. It wasn't until his album came out and I heard his lyrics and the songs and the stories that I really became to have that sense of wow, affinity with him. We'll come back to him, I'm sure. But I got the money together to send Janet a bus ticket, so she could come down. And I picked her. I walked down to the bus station. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a bike. Right. I picked her up at the bus station one afternoon. She came down the steps with a grocery bag with some clothes and a pillow. And my buddy said, you guys can stay at my place for a while till you get figured it out. And so we did. And I worked at the Midget, and she was too young to be a bartender yet, but she did that later. But then we ran out of money again and had to go back north. This is where it gets like, I almost have to look at a calendar, right? Because we not only went back to Illinois, we went out to Colorado, we went from Colorado back to Illinois, back to Key West again.
A lot of you know me from my F&B Miami page, but what you might not know is that I also run Florida's largest restaurant real estate brokerage called F&B Hospitality. Every week I meet somebody that thought that they could just wing it on a restaurant lease. And every week on F&B Miami, you guys see how that turns out. And that is exactly why I started F&B Hospitality Brokerage. We treat our clients' money like it's our money. We don't say things just to say it or paint pretty little pictures. We go based on facts and numbers. If we don't like a deal, location, or permit status, we are absolutely not afraid to tell you. It's about setting you up to last. So you could focus on food and foodies while we negotiate the build out and the terms.
But what was so special, I guess, about, obviously you keep going back to Key West. Mm-hmm. At the time, what made it so special that you're like, that you were so drawn to it?
I was always drawn to the warmth of Florida, to the palm trees and the ocean and all of that. I mean, ever since my mother and father brought us down here as children in the 50s, and going to the ocean and hearing the ocean and being in the waves of the ocean, and the whole vibe of tropical was strong. And my older sister Jane moved to Hawaii when I was 17, 16, to go to school, to college, for a junior college out there. How she swung that, I have no idea. But she said, come out and see me when you get out of high school. So 2 days after I got out of high school, I went to Hawaii. That was magical. I loved Hawaii, loved it. And I went and started my second year of college in Hawaii. But the thing that you find out very quickly is how expensive it is to not only live there, but if you got to get back home for a wedding or a funeral, really hard. So I figured I want someplace like that, but that I could hitchhike back and forth or somehow get back and forth without having to cross an ocean on a plane, because that was too expensive for me. So yeah, it was always, but Key West, Felix, Key West, 1971, 72, 73. Anybody that tells you, they were in Key West when it mattered and they were talking about any time before 1990, they weren't in the same zone as we were. Those of us that were living there then, we knew it, even if it was unconsciously, we knew it. It was a magical place. And it gave me, without intending to, it gave me my culinary identity in the process.
How did it start?
Well, it didn't start at the midget,
I figured definitely not.
but Jan and I got married in 76. Couldn't take a honeymoon. There was no money for that. 77, we finally saved up enough money, decided to go to Key West, stay with some friends. They lived right off of Duval Street. We were staying at this, it was a 2-story house, and they had the upstairs. And it was a block from Duval Street at Angela. And it was the day before we were supposed to fly back home to go back to work at a country club where she was a waitress and I was a cook. Yeah, I was a cook then. I'd been cutting the lawns, but then winter came and they couldn't use me that way. So we were about to go back home, and the guy who rented the house that we were staying at said, "Hey, man, I'm finishing up this carpentry job on this restaurant across the street, and the owner's crying because his chef is in jail, and he needs somebody." I said, "Can I talk to him?" And he goes, "I think he's still sober enough to talk." So I said, "All right." I walked across the street. It was right across the street. And I talked to the guy, and he was like, "You're hired. What are we going to do to make this happen?" And I said, "Well, my wife's got to get back home, get our truck, drive down here." He goes, "Great. Give you $500 or something like that to help make that happen. You come up to Fort Myers with me, where my original restaurant is." And that's what I did. And then I came back and I opened up as his chef this restaurant at the corner of Angela and Duval Street. It was joke. That kitchen was 100. I mean, I had a thermometer on my neck one night. It was 130 degrees. It was insane. I mean, I couldn't eat or drink enough to not have it all just sweat off me. Right. And it was like, I mean,
What was it called? You remember?
yeah, his name was Lowell. His first name was Lowell. It was called the Lowell C being his middle initial, as I remember it. It's called Mangoes and has been for years now. Well, I got fired because I refused to cook this batter for shrimp with bottled with cheese mix. Cheese whiz. And so I was broke again. Right. Anyway, I put out an application at this hotel at the end of Duval Street called the Pier House. That was 1977, and I'm laying on the floor of our rented apartment in Key West, and there's a knock at the screen door, and there's 2 shadows, and I look out there, and these 2 guys are standing there, and I'm like, "What's up?" And I go out there, and they're like, "Hey, you don't have a phone, and we need somebody to come at work at the Pier House. Are you still looking for a job?" "Yes." "Great. Come tomorrow." So I went, and that was the first place, Felix, where the scales began to fall off my eyes, as Milton put it. I began to see it. I began to see the traces of what could happen if you applied yourself and you looked at cooking as a field of work. The people I was working with were, for the first time, the graduates from the Culinary Institute of America. They were young. Most of them were younger than me by a few years anyway. There were some older people there that had worked like in Europe in the cruise lines. And so there were people around me that had taken cuisine in a different place. It was not like sit on a folding chair, wait for a ticket, flip the steak, go back, drink your vodka soda, who gives a shit. That was the kind of places I was working at for many years. I mean, I skipped over some really fascinating places where the men lived in bunkhouse behind the restaurant because that's what their lives were, broken lives pretty much. So, but here at the Pier House, they were fighting or competing to be as good as they could be. They wanted to be the best restaurant in town. And I caught that fever. And I was like, "How do you know what you know?" "Well," said one of these guys, "I went to school. I went to CIA." And I'm like, "How much does that cost?" And when he told me the number, I said, "Well, I may as well ask, for a ticket to the moon." And so he said to me, "Why don't you read?" And I'm like, why don't you fuck off? I do read. I read a lot. And he goes, I'm talking about cookbooks. And I was like, oh yeah, like who? And he said, why don't you read James Beard? I said, never heard of him. Of course, I'd never heard of him. And even if I had, I wasn't going to give this guy, the benefit of
satisfaction.
Him. No, fuck that. So I don't know how in the world. I didn't carry a checkbook. I don't know how I afforded it, but I went to the bookstore in town, bought Theory and Practice of Good Cooking by James Beard, and that was the beginning. And if we were having this interview at my house, you would see books all around us. Not quite as tall as the ceiling, but a lot. It began with a single book, it began with Beard. And with that, I began this process of, I don't believe in self or solitary education, but in a way I do. And it became my escape route. I saw especially the place I alluded to a minute ago about the men living in the bunkhouse, right, and the raging alcoholism that many people get into. And I knew I can't go down that road. I will die too. But I began to get a glimmer of an understanding that if I didn't allow myself to just work and get drunk at the end and work and get drunk at the, like a lot of work, not just in the restaurant business, but in every business. I mean, in the factory business that I was in before, right, people would drink and make all the money they could at the job, but then they totaled themselves. But with the books, I began to be able to level up and knew these words, knew these terms. I got a job after the Pier House at really what was even a better restaurant, a little tiny restaurant. And there, it's called Port of Call. And there was a template for me to look at the possibility that within my life, I could end up being like him. He was married. They had a child on the way. And I thought, that's what I want. I want my own salon, my own little place. I was reading a book by this time called The Auberge of the Flowering Hearth about these two women that had this little tiny place in France. And it was like Walden Pond or something to me. And I began to idealize a life that could be built on cooking. And I just kept on stepping up into the best restaurant that I could get into in town. And then our son was born, and Janet got homesick and decided we needed to go back home. She's one of 8 children. She really was lonely for the family, and my family was still there too, much smaller family.
Right.
So we went back home, and I put out my resume, and this is 1982. Justin was just turning 2, and I got hired by a gentleman named Gordon Sinclair in a restaurant that was being built in Lake Forest, Illinois, which was a much richer town, but not terribly far. I mean, I could drive there to go to work. To my surprise, he hired me. I found out later because my horoscope worked out well. But it was
the moon line, the moon's...
Yeah, I think it... Anyway, it was transitional time in America. I mean, this was 82, early 80s. This is when we began to see this shift in the appreciation for American food that was dormant at best before this. I think 1976, with the bicentennial, people began to think about what is America in general. And whether that was our music or whether it was fashion or whether it was food, all of these things began to rev up. And the magazines, like Food and Wine magazine, Bon Appetit magazine, Gourmet magazine, which was been in business long before that, they began to talk about the new American cuisine. So it was a great fortune that I was born at the time where there was this overlap between me coming of age and the United States and the world becoming more thoughtful about what it meant to be in the restaurant business, what it meant to be a cook. Gordon Sinclair was, he thought about, not just about, the business and the food, he thought about our place in the culture of America. He went to California, went to Spago, Wolfgang Puck's legendary restaurant, went to Chez Panisse, Alice Waters' legendary restaurant. He came back with a menu of Spago, which he let me have a copy of it. It hung in my little cubicle. He brought me a copy of Chez Panisse Menu Cookbook by Alice. I adored this book so much. And now I was the chef, so I could begin to take that love I had of creating the lyrics to creating menus. And Gordon let me roll. He had a pretty strong idea as far as what he wanted that restaurant to be a lot alike. And I didn't buck it because I thought he was right. He was much more experienced than me. Our crew was small but incredible. And when I think about who was in that kitchen, people here in Miami wouldn't know Carrie Nahabedian, but people in Chicago look at
I
her.
know Carrie.
You do?
Yeah. I've had some run-ins, but she's had some great restaurants.
Yeah. Nahabedian is her last name.
Naha, yeah.
Yeah, Naha, and now Brindi.
Is Naha still there? Or?
It's not. But she has her fine dining French restaurant.
Right.
She's extraordinary, and she deserves, like a lot of women in the business, she deserves to be much more revered. And in Chicago, she's thought of.
She was, yeah. I mean, I was there in '08, and Naha was still there in '08.
Yeah.
I remember it was an interesting meal, and I've never really had anything like that before. And she was a very interesting person as well.
She can be intense, but so I had Carrie, and then I had some other people that went on to do great things. But the most intriguing story for many is to realize that one of the people that I hired was Charlie Trotter.
So let me tell you guys something I see all the time. You take over a second gen space, you think it's turnkey, but the second you walk in, it's not exactly what you need. Maybe the bar layout doesn't flow, maybe the kitchen's a little outdated, or the bathrooms look like they haven't been touched since the 90s. That's why I tell all my clients, you need to call Brodson Construction. Whether you're building from the ground up or not, you still need the finishing touches done right. Brodson's been local and family run since 1989. They're the top 1% in Florida, and they've handled everything from luxury homes on Star Island to some of Miami's best retail and restaurant spaces like LPM, Cipriani, Hillstone, Bell Harbor, just to name a few. Bottom line, don't settle for nickel and dime contractors who might underbid the work to win the job up front and screw you over in the end. Brodson maintains integrity every step of the process to build enduring relationships and never exploit clients. So remember, if you're going to build, call Brodson Construction.
You know what? He's someone I really wanted to talk to because his name keeps popping up on our show all the time. So for those who don't know who Charlie Trotter was, who was he, and then who was he to you?
Charlie was a busboy when I first met him. He had just gotten out of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and intelligent. Yeah, you didn't, but of course you didn't notice. How could you notice that when a person's bussing tables? You don't know that. But his intelligence just was. It became quite apparent soon. He asked me for a job in the kitchen, and I said, "We don't need anybody. Aren't you happy on the floor?" "Yeah, I'm happy, but I want to be a cook. I want to be a chef." I'm like, "I don't need anybody." But he kept coming back. And later, of course, I came to realize that was Charlie's relentless pursuit of perfection. And then Carrie said to me one afternoon, the salad girl quit. Maybe we should give him a shot. Obviously, he wants the job. I said, all right, Carrie, but he's your project. And she said, I'll take care of him. You know, I'll show him. And she did. And so he was fairly invisible to me in many ways. He was still not quiet. And he still was going by the name Chuck. He wasn't Charlie yet. He was called Chuck. And so, but he would hear me talk about food at pre-service or the chef's meeting. And I think that caused him to feel like this guy is not like what I thought of as a, stereotypical chef. He's not French. He's not old. He's not locked in place. He's not just talking about food. He's talking about music. He's talking about culture. He's talking about history, which were all things that were extremely important to me. And anybody that you've probably had on your show knows this well about me because it's all an aspect of the cooking for me. It's not recipes, flavors, plating. It's the historical context, the cultural context. These are all dynamics to me that without all that, I would have lost interest a long time ago. Well, Charlie, that kind of got going. And then Charlie, he went on kind of his progression, but he went to California and started going to school. Then he got a job in Bradley Ogden's restaurant, New American Cuisine, California style. But then Mr. Sinclair and the owner of the property, Marshall Field of the famous Marshall Field and Company department stores, mega money. Mr. Field had a hotel in Jupiter, Florida. He said, "You're doing a great job. would you consider moving back to Florida? This is after 2 brutal winters.
Right.
Janet was no longer homesick, to put it mildly. So we had a ticket, to go and reroute in Florida. Charlie got a hold of me, said, I hear you're opening up for Gordon in Florida. Do you need any help? Well, that was an understatement because Jupiter at that time was like a ghost town and I needed a lot of help. And I said, yeah, we could use somebody. You know anybody? And he said, yeah, fuck you. And no, he didn't say that to me yet, not then. But he drove the car across the United States, and he couldn't find the hotel. He called up, the kitchen phone rang, and one of the cooks answered and said, hey, chef, it's for you. I don't know who it is. Hello? He goes, hey, it's Chuck. I can't find the place. I said, where are you? He said, I'm at and it was like a 7-Eleven. I said, stay right there. You're less than half a mile away. Right. This is a long story, I know, but
That's okay.
but
listen, for you, it's a long story. For us, this is real pop culture history. So
I jump in my Nissan Pulsar
Right.
and motor over there, and he is dead to the world, asleep, face pressed up against the window. I could see in the back seat the litter of food wrappers and coffee cups, magazines, all this kind of detritus from shit from his travel. It was the 4-day epic journey, his reverse Jack Kerouac. And I went inside the 7-Eleven and I came back out. There was enough of a crack in the window where I could press a Heineken against his cheek.
Right.
Nice cold Heineken.
Right.
He looks up at me and he just broke into the biggest grin. I said,
How old was he at the time?
how old was he at the time? Gosh, that's a good question. Let's see. This would have been 1984. So he's probably like 24,
Right.
23, young. But this is this short period, but this is the period of time where he went from sort of invisible busboy who became a salad person to where I see this person, just the metamorphosis is happening.
Right.
And man, he said, I want this job, but I want to run garde manger, the pantry cold side. I said, you've got it. Besides which, again, I was struggling to find anybody to work. But I said, you got it, man. You got it. Do it. And so Charlie he took it. And it was great. This was an extremely creative, important time in all of our lives. The people that I was working with, I brought some other people from Lake Forest
Right.
down with me to do this thing. We had the pool bar. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We had banquet facility that would seat 400. For one of these parties, I turned off the elevator so it couldn't go up or down, so I could use it as a station. I just needed that room. But Charlie and I began to revere the books that I was getting and that he would be sharing with me, and Paula Wolfert. We'd be talking about, making this dish that might have taken 3 days, and this methodology of making sauces that was called stratification. And anybody that's ever worked in my kitchens know it by the term strat, because that's what we called it. Make the pork strat, make the veal strat, it's a demi-glace, but it has much more of a presence of vegetables and acidity. And it was made by this particular chef that Paula Wolfert wrote about. But we were bonding. And he decided he needed to go back up north. I got so sick of this hotel and all the different responsibilities of it that I was close to cracking. I was really getting nerved out by the whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, I got to go back.
Was it Jupiter? Was it the culture? Was it just...
It was trying to run all of those all those restaurant outlets out of the one kitchen.
Right.
Hot dogs for the kids and surf and turf for mom and dad,
Right.
and the parties and all of that. It was just like finding staff. Of course, people now know that well.
Right.
But I had the Key West mythology, the love, the passion for
Right.
Key West still, and it wasn't that far away. And so for Memorial Day weekend, we went to Key West to visit a guy that I was a cook with when I was a cook back then at the Pier House. And he was working a gig, and he said, the chef at Louis' Backyard just got fired. Maybe they need somebody over there. So I went and talked to one of the 3 owners. He said, where are you at now? And I said, I'm in Jupiter. He said, I'm going to come up to Alabama, but I can stop and see you on the way back. He We talked until like 5 o'clock in the morning one night about cuisine and the whole evolution of American cuisine. He was so tuned in, wasn't a chef, but he became an important wine importer. His name is Pearl Perry, and became my partner. And so with that, goodbye Jupiter, back to Key West, pulled into town. It was like June 21st, 1985. I went to work that night. I said, Janet, I
was going to ask Janet. So Janet was already with you. She was a ride to die. And
yeah. And Justin, our son, too. So we pulled into town, and immediately I just grabbed the box of my cookbooks, moved into the former chef's office, and began. I said, I'll work in this shithole, unclean shithole, until we get through July the 3rd. On the 4th, when you close, I want everything to come out of here. Took every piece of equipment out of that restaurant, out of that kitchen, and had it spray cleaned to within an inch of its life.
Right.
And then I felt like, okay, now we can move forward. I was not the most popular person in the kitchen, probably, because I was like hell-bent for election. We're going to make this the American ideal of what it needs to be. This is the most beautiful location. And I, by this point in time, had really absorbed a lot about what the culture of Key West and the Caribbean could mean. And so I wrote the menus. They were changing to some degree every night. As a matter of fact, I posted on my Substack this morning with an image of a handwritten menu from 1985. The woman that worked there was like, every day I've got to handwrite the menu. I'm like, until I know better what to do, Connie, please. Until we got to a point we could type it in the house and all that. But anyway, I was driven, Felix. I was going for it. And Janet, she never complained about weekends or hours, whatever. She understood it. She came from a very hard-working blue-class family herself. September rolls around. One of the guys I brought was like, I'm quitting. He wrote me this very nasty note on my desk. The next morning I came to work, and I was feeling like bluesy, like, am I crazy for wanting this so bad? And there was an older guy, a Jewish guy named Alan. He said, did you get the paper yet today, chef? I said, paper? What paper? He said, the Miami Herald. I said, no. And he cackles, knowing, of course, I didn't. And he hands me this rolled up copy of the Miami Herald. And I open it up, and it's the front page of the food section. The critic's name was Lucy Cooper, and she wrote, Louis' Backyard, 4 stars, exceptional, new American. Fuck, I'm about ready to choke up right now, man.
Right.
New American cuisine at its finest. And I felt such a validation for all of the things I was trying to accomplish. I felt like, okay, all these
how
years.
taken back were you, just the fact that you got that notoriety, from the Herald, when the Herald and when food, when it was really meant something.
Huge, brother. Huge. I felt like now, this is what I've been looking to do with my life. I wanted to find the artistic place where I could somehow express myself, emotionally, culturally, all of those things. And here was this major city's major newspaper showing me that kind of understanding. And it was just a transformation. Now I felt like I had the license to do it, to really go. I was going to do it anyway. I just knew somehow I always had this in me.
Right.
Nobody was going to stop me from doing it. But now I had it in me, and I began to become more aware of, let's say, the other places in the United States that I could look at as mentor cities, like New Orleans, as places where there was a definition to the food.
Right.
People came to talk about things like farm to table. There was no farm to table to speak of in the sense of an agricultural area of Key West.
Right.
But there was the sea, and there was the fishing community. And so we didn't bring in any fish from elsewhere. As popular as salmon or Maine lobster may have been, verboten. We are not using it. We're going to use the local fish.
Right.
And then I got a chance to come up and do a dinner in Miami in a restaurant called Toby's in Kendall. And it was the first James Beard dinner that was ever held here. A chef named Michael Chiarello, who tragically died young, maybe 3 years ago, and Mark Militello, who would be well known to a lot of people in Miami. He and I, the three of us, did this dinner. And then on the way back, we stopped at these tropical fruit farms that were there just south of the city in the Redland area. And I'm like, wow, mind blowing. Why are these fruits not on the menus? Why aren't people utilizing them? Because they don't care. They just buy, they just buy the stuff that's like coming down from New Jersey. We ship our fruits to the northern chefs, to the northern restaurants, the L&Bs, Mark and Kiki L&B, Possum Trot Nursery. There was a place and still is there. Robert is here. Robert Moling and his family opened up that place in 1954, maybe. So I'm like, now I've got an awareness to the tropical fruits. Now, these things were appreciated in Key West. I remember going to a restaurant on Duval Street early on, and they were making batidos, the milkshakes made with tropical fruits. And they had a colorful plywood board up over the counter that had folk art sort of drawings of guanabana and tamarind and things like that. And so it clicked in like, okay, I would say to my pastry chef, here's Mamey. Once it's ripe, what do you think you could make with it? And we would taste it. So we began to incorporate these things into the menus. Oh my God! Now this will lead us to the Mango Gang.
Here we go. the infamous Mango Gang.
The infamous Mango Gang, which is another story. But Key West, those 4 years at Louis' Backyard, then Perry, my partner, and I, we got the opportunity to do a second restaurant in Key West called, well, we named it Mira, M-I-R-A, like look. I'll usually have said Mira, Mira, Mira. We wanted people to look. And it was a small salon, 38 seats, semi-exposed kitchen, trompe-l'oeil, painting on the wall. It was kind of like the Auberge of the Flowering Hearth again to me.
Right.
This is the first time I had any part in the ownership of a restaurant. I had been invited to write a cookbook in the year preceding.
Wow.
By an imprint of Random House, based upon 2 meals that a vice president in charge of creative development experienced at Louis. And so I was doing this. We were creating Mira. I was still advising Louis' Backyard. We opened up Mira. All the chips were on the table in many ways. Mira didn't make it.
Right.
Mira was too artistic. It was too
ahead of its time.
Too ahead of its time. I think in some ways it would still be considered not Key West in the form of what we were doing. We were doing wild mushrooms and truffles and caviar.
It's too early.
We were way too early.
Too early. Now you look at it. And
now, but I needed to find my way to express myself at the 3-star level.
Right.
I was reading 3-star chefs' books by this point in time, so I had to make the tough choice to move to the big city. And
when you say it sounds really painful. Like,
well, it was. I loved Key West. I still love Key West. If I could somehow afford how Key West has become,
right.
I'd probably be there right now cooking in my shorts again.
So is this where Amano comes into your life, or you still had something before that?
When
you moved?
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was I ran into this guy in the airport in Miami who was developing a restaurant in Boca Raton. He somehow had heard of me, I guess because of the book, and Feast of Sunlight, not these 2 books, but
right.
He said, "Are you Norman Van Aken?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, my name is, I don't care, Bobby Shapiro, and I'm putting together a restaurant in Boca. I'd like to hire you." And I'm like, "How much?" And he told me. I said, "Well, this gets me out of the sad economic situation I'm
right.
in. Me and Janet and Justin could afford to rent a nice apartment close to the restaurant." So life changed. Moved to Boca. It was crazy to move from Key West to Boca.
Right.
In Key West, you'd wake up because of the roosters or some wino knocking over your garbage cans. In Boca, it was the sound of your automatic lawn sprinklers popping on.
Right.
And so it was a bit of a culture shock, to go there and do that. And though I did, and we started doing 200 dinners, 300 dinners, 400 dinners, 500 dinners. I mean, just big numbers for my food, big numbers. Had a big staff. Well, Boca hits summer and Boca falls apart.
Absolutely.
You're in the restaurant, real estate side of
Yep.
the world. You know this intimately.
Absolutely.
So things got super shaky. A guy that was selling the Bobby Shapiro restaurant equipment came to me and said, I'm selling restaurant equipment to a guy that owns the Betsy Ross Hotel, a crazy Cuban, but he wants to open up a restaurant on both sides of the lobby. You want to talk to him? And I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to the guy. And this had really little to do with my early traction to Miami Beach.
Right.
This was more of a practical matter that I want to make a move so my family is not hurt by this. He hired me, and I was going back and forth for a while between Boca and Miami Beach, which you can imagine.
And this was still the 80s, right? We're in the 80s now, right?
This was 1990,
Okay.
Boca. 1990. It's a good thing I wrote this memoir because that really helped me.
Right. Get the timelines in.
Yes,
Right.
I really had to.
Look, as a business owner, I'll be real with you. Running my brokerage takes all my time. And in Miami, if you're not showing up online or on social media, you just don't exist. That's why I've worked with Sage Marketing Studios from the very beginning. Website, social, even this podcast. They're the ones behind the camera. Building strategy, keeping it consistent, and making sure my brand looks like it actually belongs in the city. So just a tip. Stop having your cousin post blurry iPhone pics once every 3 months. Hit up Sage Marketing Studios. You can find them on Instagram at socialmedia.sage and tell them Felix sent you.
Going back to Charlie, obviously you told me how you guys met. You guys obviously went in different directions, but still kind of made it to the top separately together. That makes any sense.
Yeah.
So for people that don't remember Charlie, like, what did he mean to the business?
Well, the documentary Love Charlie came out a couple of years ago now, and I think that the director and the producer, writers, did a very good job of illustrating that dichotomy that was Charlie. Charlie was known, when we first got to know him, by his kid named Chuck, but in the movie, they did this well, where he transitions into becoming Charlie Trotter. He stops dressing in kind of like blue jeans and baseball shoes and starts dressing in dress pants and leather shoes and wearing a nice shirt underneath his jacket and becoming this archetype of what it meant to him to be this chef. And that became a role that eventually, I think, became this trap. He had 25 years of being a person who was an unknown to becoming a person who was looked up to and then also not liked because he was seen as being so harsh. I was surprised, when I saw him dress down people in his kitchen when we were doing one of the dinners, and a number of years later, not many, this transition happened, and when it did, it was a shock to me. But I knew that it was real and that there were a lot of people that looked at Charlie as just way too hard on them. And they couldn't, Grant Achatz, he couldn't handle it. He left one night, just boom, I'm out. And many others. As a matter of fact, I saw something come out on Substack recently about somebody writing about Charlie, and they said 15 people that used to work there would not let me interview them because they just didn't want to go on record of what they felt what their situation was. But to me, that was Charlie playing a role to such a degree that it became a trap for him. And it eventually, I think, is part of what caused him to become so ill. To me, Charlie was always my biggest advocate, my little brother who became a superstar. He loved me. He was so funny. He would send me. No, he got sick toward the end, and we were denying it, but we could see it. He was transitioning. His face was becoming very puffy. He was losing coherence. But he'd send me W.C. Fields clips, from YouTube and Groucho Marx stuff and horrible rock songs that he wanted to, torture me with listening to, and he'd be laughing his ass off at it. Justin's, just his way of being the old Charlie at the same time.
Right.
He sent me, we touched on this earlier, but he sent me so much in terms of letters, menus, the postcards, which are covered well in the movie, that I have these 3-ring binders at home that I am slowly between, being on the phone with the restaurant or being online talking about something, doing something work related. I'm trying to slide in an hour every day to where I'm going to somehow or another write this book that will celebrate the relationship I've had with that man. He called me Otto. I called him Fio. Fio for Fyodor Dostoevsky, because that's who he looked up to the most. Otto was a character out of a John McPhee short story in the New Yorker about a New York chef that wasn't his real name, but Charlie was so smitten with this story that I became the pseudonym I was Otto and he was Fio, so it might be in the title somewhere, or
Right.
the subtitle.
That's going to be the name of the new book.
Maybe. First
right.
time I'm talking about it.
I love it. I love it. And thanks for sharing it. That's important. And again, I think, at least to people today who don't know who he was or who he is, have to understand that he was one of the most important people in our industry.
Oh, nope. I mean, people should rightly revere Thomas Keller.
Right.
The degustation menu that Charlie was doing, he was doing before anybody. The vegetable degustation menu nobody was doing that. The kitchen table, nobody was doing that. The farm to table, Charlie made sure that there was a garden in the Cabrini Greens housing projects in the poorest area where students were learning how to grow vegetables and herbs. And then he was bringing them at his expense into the private party room next door and feeding these inner city kids a meal made with the same kind of food, the same price point, but free to the people who were eating it in the townhouse next door. They don't understand the humanitarian, the charitable person that he was always, that he maintained, even though during these years where things got,
Right.
tense, but he was still the person doing that too. So he's very misunderstood. Thank God for the documentary because it gave people a chance to get to know the man. Many people who are a little bit younger that didn't know him or never got a chance to dine there, at least through the documentary, are getting to know him. And I hope if I end up realizing this book, they'll get to know him. His handwriting, Felix, he could put 1,000 words on a postcard that big. He was intense. Oh my
Right.
God, he was intense. So funny. What a sweetheart, really.
That's amazing. I mean, what was Miami Beach, Key West like during the Miami Vice days? I mean, obviously it got this big culture shock, in the pop culture world of, excess and, money and, people started flocking down to Miami. I mean, but what was it actually like to be here, and kind of observe it? And, I'm sure it was different types of people maybe that you were used to, or, I mean, what was it like in terms of clientele?
I don't have any memory of Miami Vice being on yet in Key West days, but if it were on, I wouldn't have had time to watch any television, I don't
Right.
think. But I became aware of it when we were doing Amano. Sounds right. Maybe some fact checker could tell me that show didn't air until '94, but I certainly feel like culturally, Miami Vice was huge.
Right.
I think it must have been because they understood how the models had so much to do with the renaissance of the beach. Now, remember, as children, my sisters and I went
Right.
to Miami Beach, and the hotels were vigorous and doing well. But by the time we got there in '90, they called it a God's waiting room, and there were the old people in their rockers on the front porch,
Right.
Waiting for that day, last call. But it was fast.
Right.
It was fast with how quickly it was changing with you could hear the jackhammers. You could hear the hotels turning from, falling down relics of their former glory into something much different. We were pretty far down the road
Right.
at 1440 Ocean Drive we weren't quite in the thick of things like the Colony, which is the most iconic, most photographed hotel, I think, on the beach still, even though it wasn't the busiest. I think Tony Goldman was the guy that
right.
really had so much to do with the beach becoming the thing that it became, along with Mark Soika of News Cafe. I mean, News Cafe was just, there'd be 300 people out on the patio, sunlit patio, and a lot of models, a lot of pretty people.
And this is before Lincoln Road? Is this before?
Before Lincoln Road. Yeah, I had actually had to stop going back and forth. Janet, my mom, and our son moved to a place in Perrine. Well, we all did. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back and forth every night. I was trying to operate the 2 restaurants. So for about a year, I lived in the hotel, going home on Sundays and coming back on Monday.
Right.
It was insane.
Right.
I would walk around Lincoln Road a little bit sometimes because that was my neighborhood. It was, dust bowls, rolling through, people with a shopping cart, and it was beat up. I mean, it's a ghost town, but quickly that changed too. I mean, it was like watching bamboo grow, just hear it growing. So my beach was right time, right place. Amano struck a nerve. Time magazine wrote about a number of places in Miami. And she wrote, the best being the coolly modern Amano. And I was like, Time magazine, Mom, look at this. We're in Time magazine. And I began to feel, really like Miami.
Was the shift?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't missing Key West. I was too busy to miss Key West. I was too driven to want to be part of this vanguard. I wanted to lead us as far as I could lead us. And we got the attention of industry magazines. We got in the London Times. We got in the New York Times. I mean, things were happening fast. I mean, if I look back in my calendar books, which I kept over the years, which is part of the material that I used to write the memoir, people, how did you remember all that? I'm like, well, my calendar wrote, I had things in the calendar. This happened this day, Bal Harbor, Bali High, Share Our Strength, all these things were there. So
do you think also like it was like the Versace days, like, that he brought a lot of that culture in that appreciated food and.
Well, it was right down the street.
Right.
I mean, and he was having breakfast at the News Cafe
every morning, right?
Every morning till his last morning.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Till and there was other things that were bad things, the European tourists that were shot. So there was this notoriety about Miami Beach, the glam, the sexiness, the vibe, the coolness. Mickey Rourke, for God's sakes.
Right.
I mean, Mickey lived in the Betsy Ross Hotel during my time at the Betsy Ross Hotel. He refereed a fist fight I had on the beach with the owner of the hotel on my last day.
Tell me about that. You gotta give me a quick version of that.
Well, the owner was. I mean, I think if Al Pacino had a role model for Tony Montana, it could have been the owner. Not quite the machine gun crazy, but he was a force to be reckoned with. Janet said, I was a bartender in Key West. I never saw a person drink more than that guy.
Right.
He was a married man with kids and successful, but he was Dionysian. He was on 2 sides at once, But he decided to fire Prohl. He was going to run the dining room, and I'm like, no fucking way, man. Right. No way. And he says, what are you going to do, quit? I said, yes, I would quit. He said, you would never quit Amano. Amano made you famous. I mean, he spoke in that way, too.
Right.
Spit coming out of his face sometimes. I'm like, fuck you, Novell. And he said, I fight you. I said, let's go. And we went across the street to the sand. It's like out of a movie right now. And Novell and Mickey were fast friends. They were, party hardy. So Mickey came along, thought it was hilarious. And here we were.
He was laughing his ass off
for sure. Yeah. So we kind of square off on the beach. And Novell, after all this drinking, I hit him in the stomach once and he threw up and fell down. And then he surrenders, but then he gets on his knees and throws sand in my face. And Mickey, said, that's it, Novell, you're done, whatever. And I went back to my office, and there was no question. That was the end.
Right.
I put my books in a box, and then I called Jen, and I said, come pick me up. So she came down and we loaded up my cookbooks and we went back to the house and said, what now? And that was the Amano days. I got a job consulting for a few different places, but it was lean years. Now,
Right.
Mano ended in 92. I didn't open up Norman's until 95.
95, right?
We opened in March of 95.
But those years also, you did something pretty groundbreaking where you started, mixing flavors and, I believe you coined the phrase fusion, right? That everybody uses today.
Yes.
I hope you trademarked it.
You can't trademark a phrase like that. But I did. It was never used in the context of cuisine.
Right.
I was invited to go to a symposium on American cuisine in 1989.
Right.
We were still in Key West. And it was right around the time that Amir was breaking up, as a matter of fact. Such a juxtaposition of success and trouble going on in our lives, in my life, in the culinary, in the professional side, not our personal lives, not us being a couple, us being a family, but the restaurant world was cracked. It was cratering, fracturing, all of those descriptive terms. But anyway, I got invited to go to the symposium, and they said, we want you to speak on a panel one morning, and there'll be other people on the stage with you, and you're all going to answer this question. The question is this: why do you cook the way you cook? And the people on the stage with me that morning were Lydia Shire from Boston, Tom
yeah.
Douglas from Seattle, Emerald Lagasse from New Orleans, Charlie Trotter from Chicago, and myself. Everybody answered the question in their own particular way. I had never been given a speech before. And as much as I enjoy this, what we're doing and talking,
Right.
talking to 300 or 400 people giving a speech is a different thing.
Right.
But I had written an essay just for myself, just because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the way I was cooking. There was something going on in the world where there was people were talking about high end, super high end, but then I'd be going to the little restaurants in Key West and tasting the rustic family kind of flavors. I came across a book called On Culture and Cuisine by a Frenchman, translated into English. I couldn't read French, of course. But in this book, Felix, which is a very scholarly book, and I've got the book, I can't even take it out of the house anymore. I'm so worried about it falling apart. But I underlined and highlighted passages. He talks about the ebb and flow of cuisine over the course of 500 years, essentially, from the time of 1300s with a guy named Taillavant, who was allegedly the first cookbook author, to the Nouvelle Cuisine food movement of the 1980s. And he talks about there being this pendulum between this love of ornate, intricate food, and then a pushback, the pendulum would swing the other way toward more of a reverence toward familial, rustic kind of cooking. Ebb and flow, the cooking of the papacy, ornate, the cooking of the aristocrats, ornate, the cooking in the homes, not. The cooking in the bistros, more rustic, gutsy.
Right.
In my parallel there was the restaurants, the little restaurants in Key West, the Cuban restaurants, the Haitian restaurants, Bahamian restaurants. I'd eat that food and I'd go, I love this food. But then I'd want to express myself in the sense of what I'd learned about, especially the codified French cuisine of Escoffier. I wanted both. And so there was a place in there where he wrote, after many a stormy scene comes a marriage. And I wrote in the margin, a fusion. And this light bulb went off for me, and I was like, okay, so what does that mean as far as what I wanted to do? And what I wanted to do was to take my menu writing, and I wanted to be able to express both sides. So I wrote this paper. I don't know if you must have, well, maybe you're too young to have seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Well, Richard Dreyfuss, right?
Remember how crazy he was with the mashed potatoes?
Yeah.
And his wife is like waking out, like, what are you doing with the fucking mashed potatoes, I was like that with this paper. I was just like, I had to write this thing. That was a response to Ravel's book.
Right.
Like, what direction am I taking with what I want to do? This sounds so high-minded in a way, but it was important to me to know where I was going to go with the next 5 years, whatever. And so I wrote this paper. It's like a page and a half, and it's called On Fusion Cooking. So that's what I delivered in Santa Fe when they asked me, what do I cook? Why do I cook the way I cook? I cook the way I cook because of this. I was advised to bring at least 20 copies of my speech to the audience that day and give it to some of the journalists that were there. A woman who was a journalist for a paper that was on the AP Wire, her name was Regina Schrambling. She was floored by it, and she put it out on the AP Wire. So fusion went into the food culture rapidly because of it, but it was disassociated with me almost instantly. Like that day didn't exist except in a fever dream I was having, maybe.
Right.
So it was not widely known, and in many respects, it's still not widely known. And there are still so many ways that people have misunderstood it because so many people, just like anything. I mean, the beatniks, the beat movement, rock and roll, many people just disparage those things. But if the term somehow matters, then it goes on. Even crookedly, there's essentially two definitions of fusion cooking. There is the thing I'm talking about where the fusion between the high and the low, which is also what Versace was doing with fashion, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. The high and low of Warhol, what he was doing with art, Campbell soup cans. The high and the low of what I was trying to express through food. But then there was the other fusion, which I think people more often thought about because they never read my essay. They weren't there in Santa Fe that day, which is the fusion between a French dish and a Thai dish. That is what normally people think about. And I look at it that way too. I think fusion cooking, definition one, definition two. They're, to me, neither one is more important to me than the other one. Fusion in the sense of this thing where you have something where you come from, I have something where I come from. We make a meal one day, and now I'm learning something from you and you're learning something from me. Wars, marriages, travel, pandemics, all of these things hurl cultures, people, civilizations into places that we're not at before. Fusion cooking existed the first time some guy or woman rowed their canoe across a river to another village and ate something they didn't understand, brought it back over to their village and made something different with it. That was fusion cooking.
Right.
I did not invent fusion cooking.
Right.
I came up with a term that people feels, a lot of people, especially has endured now 40 years or so, they feel like it somehow can express what they're intending to do.
Right. And, I've saw several interviews that you've done. I believe it was the Sokolov book, right? Where you speak about a lot of those cultures and food traveling oceans and time to if you want to kind of talk a little bit about that. Because I think that's I thought it was really impressive, by the way.
I'm impressed that you know that book and that you've studied enough to because it's not like many people could even ask me a question like that. But Sokolov's book, Why We Eat the Way We Eat, came out in 92, I think. And I bought that slim volume, and that book and the book before that on culture and cuisine, those are two of the most powerful books I've ever read that are not cookbooks.
Right.
And Sokolov, he understood the Columbian exchange. Brilliant man, wrote for the Wall Street Journal for years. I'm pretty adept with the English language, but I had to have a dictionary next to me when I was reading that book sometimes.
Right.
He was good. And not that it's important to know big words or use big words, but he made me want to learn some big words. But he helped me feel green light about why it was so important to drill down on the New World and what the New World could offer in terms of a voice to cuisine, an identity to cuisine. He talked about how rapidly, through transoceanic voyages, global navigation, how ingredients and food methodology transitioned quickly. By 1560, 1580, people were going through the narrowest points, whether it was in a narrow point in Mexico or the Panama Canal, which wasn't a canal yet,
Right.
and taking ingredients back and forth between the old world and the new world. Merchants were following explorers. Why? Because there was money to be made.
Right.
You know, despite Columbus was able to convince the king and queen of Spain to pay for this because he was going to bring the spices back from India. And of course, he thought that he had landed in India when he got to the New World. He never even made it to the landmass that is America now, what we
Right.
call America. But he did come back with some things like peppers and ostensibly vanilla and chocolate and things like that, which others soon followed,
Right.
like Magellan. And this happened within a span of 100 years. Then the Dutch and the trading and all
Right.
of that, it became volcanic as far as what was going on. And so, like Ravel's book, this is underlined and highlighted, and it was really about, I guess in some ways it was about, I'd followed European model by following French cuisine, but because of his book, I was now seeking to follow a more New World model, and New World in the sense of what did the Mayans do? What did the
Right.
Aztecs do? What do these pre-Columbian civilizations have going on? Sounds like a lot to think about for a
No,
person.
I actually think it's fascinating. What did Columbus, bring from Spain to them, and what did they pick up that they incorporated into their own type of cuisine?
Well, there
And-
were no tomatoes in Italy
Right.
preceding to the New World.
Right.
There was no chilies in Thai cuisine preceding to the New World, and so that just shows you how this global exchange came about and continues to come about, the ramifications of it. Fusion to me happens everywhere and has happened everywhere all over. There's fusion cuisine in Thailand. There's fusion cuisine in New Jersey. There's fusion cuisine
Right.
in the tip of South America. There's the regional cuisines that occur everywhere, and they're transitional. I mean, the regional cuisine of Miami, for instance, has been a transitional cuisine. People didn't cook the way in 1940s and 1950s. There certainly weren't a lot of people going into the Cuban restaurants that would have existed even in the 60s that were not Cuban people.
Right.
So that's where we, as this, I'm on the older side of the generation that became aware and doing these things. Take a person like Eileen, she's on the,
Andrade, we love you, Eileen.
we do, honey. We appreciate you. And Mike and the others who are giving voice to the history of Miami that wasn't given voice to until I started to say, fuck it, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And people would be like, you're crazy to put black beans and plantains on a menu that's going to charge, what you are charging. And I'm like, taste the black beans and taste the plantains and taste it with the things I'm putting with. And if you don't want to come, I'll understand it, but you're just not there yet. And fortunately, some of these people came to work with me. Some have been on your show.
Many have been on my show, and many praise you, for that, and give you credit that they're only as good as they are because they were taught by the best.
Well, I'm only as good as I am because I was willing to learn from people who are a lot smarter than me.
Right.
And so I think that goes around. And I think that's our duty doesn't stop with, here's the menu, make the food, and don't ask me any questions about where it came from. No, I want you to. I want you to be as fired up about this whole thing as I am. And I'll make myself as available to you as I can be. And I think that's why you see them want to talk to me still.
Right. In your opinion, who are kind of like the hot upcoming chefs that are kind of leading the way in the culinary scene down here?
This is a very, very tough question because, when you don't mention everybody that you know and care about,
Right.
I might not have thought of Eileen a minute ago.
Right.
I might not have, because she didn't work in my kitchen. She worked with her family.
Right.
But I'm glad that I did think of her because I think she is one of those persons. And obviously, Phil Bryant, who works for Michael White, worked with me in a number of restaurants. He's doing, Michael White's kind of food now, but
Yep.
he has this. He comes from Virginia and he knows all about that cuisine. But he came to work with me as a very young person. He came to work with me in Key West. He is an old soul cook.
Right.
Michael Beltran, obviously, Michael cares so fiercely about where he lives and
Yes.
where his parents and grandparents lived. You can't have a conversation without Mike without feeling the fire come out of him. Although when he first came to work with me, I don't think he said a word for the first 2 weeks. He was waiting, I guess, to emerge.
But that's a guy who was really intense on community and, the culture and the food, because he puts his love and soul into it. So
Yeah. And he also continues to he's not done. He's still looking.
Right.
He didn't have a duck press 10 years ago.
I love his duck press. That's great.
He will look outside of the box. Like when they created L'Oreal, he wanted to find a way to express his interest in French cooking with that restaurant. Because he's got multiple restaurants, he has multiple ways of expressing his curiosities, which I think has been one of the ways that I have found different modalities to express myself in. Michael Schwartz, Michael has been here since '95, but having come from, I guess he was born in Philly, but he was working in California. But he got that, love of farm-raised produce there. He was fired up about that, and remains fired up about that. We are doing a Mango Gang dinner at Michael's restaurant on June 30th.
I did not know that, but I am definitely putting that on my calendar. That is incredible. So for, now that we're getting back to the story, for those who don't know or who are too young to remember, who was the Mango Gang?
Mango Gang, I had written A Feast of Sunlight, my first cookbook, in '88 is when it came out. Jan and I went we went around the United States on book tour. Book tours back then were different.
It was a production.
Oh my gosh. We did Good Morning America or Good Morning Boston, and then they said, what restaurant do you want to go to? So I got to pick out the best restaurant in every city, in 12 cities. Anyway, having written the book and having experienced publishing, as I mentioned before, we were being written about, a small number of us were being written about in the same newspaper articles and magazines.
Right.
No, there was no name yet. The same names, though, were there. Right. Between 4 and 5 and 6 of us were seemingly always there. And I went for a run on South Beach when I was still at Amano, trying to be healthy, trying to do the right thing. I came back from the run. But while I was on the run, I said, why don't we do a book together? What if the 4 or 5 of us did the book together? That'd split up the work into 4 or 5 parts.
And who were the 4?
Oh, I'll tell you. And I said, then we're not in competition for being in the magazine or the newspaper. Then we're all like, yay, good for you. Sell some books at your restaurant. Sell some books at your restaurant. And so I came back from that run, and that was the spark. There was going to be and came along a Share Our Strength dinner at Turnberry like a few weeks later. So I knew I'd see the same people that day. And as it turned out, we're sitting in the office, game planning a little bit or something. And I say, hey guys, while we're all together, I have an idea. What if we all wrote a book together? And, I said, I've written the book, and maybe we can, maybe one of you's got a lawyer, one of you's got the bookkeeper side of it, all that. So we can all kind of have a little company as we go along. And they all went yes. Robin Haas was the chef of Turnberry at that time. He wasn't in the office at that moment. To my mind, he was the 5th person or one of the 5. He deserved to be there. And I would say, pragmatically, wouldn't it make sense to have him be one of the 5? Besides the righteousness of it, besides the fact that the Turnberry is going to sell more books than we are out of our restaurants.
100%. That's smart.
So, I really wasn't the best at always thinking that way, but I was thinking that way. But Mark said no. Just 4 of us. And it was kind of like, if we didn't come to an agreement right then and there was going to be no omelet, So I said, okay. And Ellen said, okay. And Doug said, okay. So those were the 4.
So it was Douglas Rodriguez, Alan Susser. who's
Mark Militello
Mark Militello, and yourself.
and myself.
Amazing.
And so the lawyer that we used was a guy named George Pincus. That was Douglas's lawyer. He had an office downtown. We went down to his office, up some second story. I still smell the wood and the books and all of that, sitting there. And the lawyer's like, you guys have to incorporate, form the LLC. What's your corporate name going to be? And we were like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. He goes, well, you got to have one. I got to put something on this piece of paper. And I don't know where this came from, but I know who said it. Douglas. There's a little debate about different names, but then Douglas goes, Mango Mafia. And Pincus, the lawyer, goes, no fucking way. No way. You cannot say mafia. No, boys. You got to think of something else. Somebody else, I don't know which one of it, I don't think it was me, said gang. So, and that works well with the word mango and gang. The G's all start to go together.
Right.
So that's how Mango Gang became known. And we went to work on a book. And we actually, I know this from my notes and my calendars, that we had a meeting at Allen's or we had a meeting at Mark's. And I wrote a check to Allen so he could give it to the accountant. And so this all started to happen. We got an agent. We actually got the agent because of Mark. He knew this guy from Mark Miller out in Santa Fe, this English-born agent, John Harrison. Really cool guy. Anyway, then a fax comes through from to us from Mark's lawyer saying Mark's out. Why? What? He goes, yes, he's too busy. Like, he couldn't tell us himself.
Right.
And that was it. However, it wasn't it in the minds of so many people,
Right.
because then I kept getting asked about, and I'm sure the other guys
Right.
got asked about Mango Gang.
I mean, look, we're still talking about it.
We still talking about
Right.
maybe it was 4 years ago, the South Beach Wine and Food Festival asked Cindy Hudson to do a dinner with the Mango Gang. And Cindy's laughs, we were just talking about this the other day. Cindy laughs, she goes, I wasn't in the gang. And they're like, what do you mean you weren't in the gang? She goes, I was not one of the Mango Gang. And they're like, well, that's wrong. I'm like, I agree. So we did the dinner. And we did the dinner with Cindy, and Mark and Douglas and Alan and myself were all there. All five of us were there. So was Anna Navarro, the news lady. She was there. So we did that. And then, surprisingly, I got an email from Michael Schwartz maybe 1 month ago, and he said, would you consider doing a Mango Gang dinner? And my first impulse was like, no, I wouldn't. And then I just really still. And then he said, be you and me and Cindy and Alan, who are all still in town. The other guys don't live here anymore. And I said, yeah, I will. And our son's a chef too. And I thought, I would love him to experience this moment of history of a Mango Gang dinner,
Yep.
being there with me, cooking alongside me. And I've come to really love everybody that's in the group. And so we met just like a week ago for photography to promote it. But apparently the tickets are all but sold. And will you hold on to at least 6 tickets
Right.
for me? Because I'm going to have some people who are mad at me if they don't even have a crack at this.
Of course.
So it's going to be a tight, fun thing.
That's going to be really fun, though.
Yeah.
I guess here's another conversation that, a lot of people should have, and I bring this up a lot, mental illness in, hospitality in the restaurants. I don't know how long it's been going on. I know that it's been raising a lot more awareness over the last, 10, 15 years about everything that goes into, the scene, whether it's the sous chef, the servers. Like, has that always been a thing, or is this just something that we're discovering over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, it's always been a thing where people have gotten to the point where they've taken their lives over their jobs.
Right.
Vatel, a French chef from God knows 1800s. I have to look that one up, but he plunged himself on his sword because the fish didn't arrive for a big banquet. Who is the French chef that also shot himself? It's tragic. But so it has existed for a long time. But as far as a conversation that has gone past a personal one-off, oh, they did that or they did that, to bear, it became part of the admission of it occurring in the culture is new.
Right.
As far as I would place it, I think that different symposiums that have happened well after the one I was talking about earlier today came about. MAD being the MAD symposium, and people talking about. I remember Chris Constantino was an early person who came out about his struggles, and I think he was very brave of him, and I think he helped other people being willing to talk about their struggles with it, because it's a very macho culture that we were brought up to believe that this is the way it is. And if you're not used to the idea of your chef humiliating you or throwing something at you, you're not really part of the important restaurants.
Right.
That whole thing pretty much eluded me. I did not. I had some chefs who were assholes, and would say you're a stupid American or
Right.
something like that. But I certainly had nobody ever, assault me,
Right.
physically or in any way, shape, or form. And I mean sexual assault in that mix as well. No, I was very fortunate not to do that. My mother was in the restaurant business, and she's a major reason why I felt the comfort of when I realized that it could be an artistic thing.
Right.
I didn't want a restaurant that she wouldn't feel that she could be proud of her son for operating. So it wasn't part of our normal thing. I mean, sometimes I'd catch one of my chefs doing something bullshit
Right.
to another chef and tell them that could be their last day or they'll never do that again.
Right. But even outside of that, I mean, like, obviously, I've partied with a lot of chefs, and they know how to party. Whether it's drinking hours after the restaurant closes,
Yeah.
or we're in Miami, so there's other extracurricular activities, and I just feel that that's such a part of the culture now.
Yeah. I mean, cocaine in Key West in the late 70s, early 80s, was pandemic.
Right.
I mean, people were doing it in the wait stations. It was such it seems like such a different time. But what has definitely gotten bigger, much more problematic, has been how soul snuffing life has become for people in the industry who really want to be in it, but find that it is in complete odds with their well-being, their sense of self-worth. And so it's you couldn't say, I'm not coming into work today because I'm going to go see my counselor. You couldn't say those words in the 80s. You didn't say that.
Right.
Now we've slowly, I think, there's gotten to be a much more of a compassionate understanding of what it would mean. When you have family members and friends in your family or your extended family that you understand this is real to them, this is pain to them, then you've got to redirect what your culture is in your restaurant. And I don't know how successful some of these, big operators are doing in that regard, but we know for us to succeed, we can't have a team that's falling apart.
Right.
Yeah, if one person goes down, you're still open for the same. You need them. You need to help them somehow or another. Have a conversation. Don't make it about you're a failure. You're not in the industry unless you do this. There are many ways to be in the industry, and people have found alternate ways to succeed in their love of making food that don't necessarily have to be about answering 150 tickets, and staying on that line.
Right.
I mean, I remember at Amano, there was a woman who worked with us on the salad side, which is all the way down the line from me, the way that line worked. She pissed rather than leave the line.
Wow.
And I was like, what? Why? I couldn't let you all down. We had tickets in the window, and I'm like, no, honey, no, you tell us, and we'll cover. But that was a very wow
Right.
moment. I mean, I could see the puddle underneath her and the shame that she had, and it broke my heart.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you see in terms of like the whole culture shifting? Do you like what's going on? Is it moving a little different from what you thought it was going to be in terms of like culinary? And, do you think that people are just creating and being more original and it's staying different, or is it going a different course now?
It's got to be harder than ever.
Right.
Economically harder than ever to be an operator in this town. My heart goes out. My heart goes out to people who are in their 40s or so and trying to accomplish the things that they dream of accomplishing. I keep thinking of names of people like that I didn't mention that are doing really good food, like Mike Parolo or Giorgio.
Mike, absolutely. Giorgio, yep, absolutely.
These people that I'm thinking of them. I'm thinking what their lives have been like during COVID and the shutdown and the pandemic and the prohibition of being able to do anything for so long, and how I was so fortunate to be part of the world where, yes, I lost my little restaurant Mira, or yes, Amano was crazy and we broke up and we had to go reform and had to do these different things. We had our challenges, but it seems to be more pervasive than ever. And the economics of operating, not only in Miami, but certainly everybody in California and New York, and these parallel stories, how hard it is to find people, how hard it is to find people who want to or are willing to work in the way that you would work weekends and holidays, and you'd work 60 hours a week and consider it normal. Then there's been a total rethinking of what is normal.
Well, I also think that, and this is just from what I see because of what I do, I really think that we're, for the first time in a really long time, I think we're really oversaturated. I think that there's just too many restaurants with subpar food. The Miami PR machine is great. They can convince people that everybody's doing Mila and Joe Stone Crab type of numbers, and it makes operators, oh, okay, well, they'll call me and like, they have $100,000 left in their savings account. Like, we want to catch this wave. And I tell them, like, guys, it's not all it's cracked out to be.
$100,000.
Unless you are the best and it's going to take you more than $100,000, don't do it. And that, for me to say that's what I do for a living. I'm just looking out, and there's a lot of those type of people, and it makes me really nervous that people are going to jump into the unknown and they're going to lose everything.
I agree.
Who don't know what they're doing.
I agree, and it's not going to get any better in the foreseeable future. I mean, maybe if you're willing to open up in the Redlands or Everglades, or so far up the road, and you can somehow find a deal, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not probably as vociferous as Mike might have been when he was talking about these groups, but because he's fighting it he's fighting the day to day. He's living that life, fighting it. When Michael Schwartz got his deal tossed out the door at Tiger Tail and Mary, because the New Yorkers were willing to come in and pay so much more rent
for the same group,
that was a kidnapping,
right?
And so there's a bloodletting that's going on. I would, I still have my dream of doing some iteration of what I want to do. Even at my age, I pine to still do a restaurant, or more of a wine bar kind of a thing, where I can advise the menu, create the dishes, but somebody else is going to be doing it, so I can meet with the guests and talk about their meal, their food, their lives. I sometimes think about it having a small cooking school element to it as well, because I love teaching. So I still want to do it.
So correct me if I'm mistaken. So I was actually a huge fan of Number 9 Social, Wynwood, and I know that was kind of the plan, was to have like that cooking class or cooking school in it. Same thing. I think that it was too early, and I definitely don't think Wynwood. And, same situation where the landlord was like, yeah, we could get more money. I'm sure they were all over you to close, because they turned around and doubled the rent on that thing and got it immediately, But that's what I mean, is like all the stuff that you came in with was so ahead of its time and it was so incredible that, I would love to see you, come back and have something in Miami at least that we could, like, a lot of the local and old school restaurateurs could enjoy again, because I think that we feel that we haven't had that in a while, because there's just a lot, okay, don't get me wrong.
Those operators don't care about
Right.
it. They're there for money.
Right.
They're not there for soul.
Right.
You need money to, you're in the business, it's oxygen. You're not going to move without money.
Right.
We are very fortunate that Norman's hit the way that it hit, created the second and the third and the fourth different, we were in Los Angeles, Orlando, Key Largo, and Miami all at the same time with
Right.
Norman's. We were fortunate. Our timing was fortunate. If I was in the age of some of the people that I'm admiring for the restaurants that they do, I'd be looking at Little River
Right.
and Little Haiti. And I don't know where else I'd be looking. I mean, I love the Grove, but it's
Too expensive.
If you didn't get in there like 10 years ago, I don't know how you'd get
I
in.
mean, Matt Cush from Locale just got pushed out with attorneys, and they turned around and they're now leasing his space for $160 a foot.
Matt is a great operator,
Great
fun
human,
guy.
great operator,
Oh, he's so funny. Yeah, and I love the different soulful things that Matt has done. The deli, for instance.
Right.
That was just great. And that it's really hard to maintain your soul, your integrity, and the environment that we're in Miami, and anybody that can do it. And I learned so much, Felix, from the little mom and pops that have been there 40 and 50 and 60 years. The parents of Eileen kind of restaurants.
Right.
I'll still, when I wrote one of the books, which covered 30 countries from Latin America and the Caribbean, I discovered a Miami that I almost didn't know existed,
Right.
because I interviewed all these people that worked with me. They talked about there were their aunts and uncles and everybody went to, and where do they shop?
Yeah.
New World Kitchen was the name of that book. And I still go to some of the places that I discovered 30 years ago. Well, I didn't, they were in business, but I discovered for me, and in many ways, a little Peruvian place, a little Brazilian place. I'm like, why would I go to the place that's got gold leaf on a steak in a fucking box when I can go get a bowl of soup with maybe a corn cob in it and some potatoes and some short ribs or something that tastes better, and come away after I've spent $30 and have leftovers? Why would I? What's the scene? I don't care about the scene. I mean, am I turning into a codger? Well, if I am, bring it.
No, I don't think so. And Beltran was on the podcast last week, and he said exactly the same thing, that he doesn't want, when he goes to a restaurant, he wants to eat a good quality meal that's cooked from the heart without somebody shaking their ass 2 feet away from him, because it's like a party scene,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in many ways, this is not just restaurants. This is the culture in many general ways. The politics of the United States has become very transactional. The
Right.
soulfulness, the honesty, the hard-earned kind of reputation that you want as a human being is becoming harder and harder to attain.
So that being said, where do you see the future of culinary and hospitality?
Believe that there will always be a future in culinary and hospitality. I don't think there'll be. I don't think these endeavors that have come down here and are the plutocrats, the robber barons, I don't think they're going to last all that long, because they're going to cut each other up and get tired of it and just go back to. They're going to go back to some other new adventure.
Right. Well, a lot of those guys also are like, I don't know if you heard in the news, Richard Carring just sold his whole restaurant portfolio to a Saudi group to license so they can open locations in, over the Middle East. So now you have Sexy Fish and Scott's and Annabelle. So like they're now, I guess they're going to be just high-end versions of when these big corporations buy restaurants to kind of plant flags everywhere with them. I mean, I think that we'll still absolutely need, people like yourself and people like Mike and Eileen and Parolo, because I think that we still want good food from the heart. I think we always will.
Yeah, I think there is a community that still will, and I think that with the drunk comes the hangover.
Right.
And the hangover is happening, and I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that hurts. Why did I spend all that money? Treated like a chump. They don't care about me. Where do I go to find this soulful operation? And it won't be easy for anybody. I wouldn't say that it will be, but as long as people don't lose their, the thing they can't imagine themselves being, the heart, then there's always going to be a room for places that have that to offer. Can they afford it? That remains to be a question. But I would just keep going further out geographically. People said when we did Norman's in 1995 on Almeria Avenue,
Right.
that we were too far away from Miracle Mile. We were
south,
not going
right.
to make it. There were 3 failed restaurants in that same spot before us
Right.
within 4 years. But we brought something that made people come the extra distance, and thank God they did.
So you don't believe in cursed restaurants, right?
Heh.
Like, you ask me, like, for example, people always ask, like, well, in Midtown, how come, none of those restaurants make it? I tell them, I was like, I think a lot of them are poorly curated by landlords. If you're going to give a guy who just has money and you're just going to keep turning that space over,
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you put somebody quality and somebody that knows what they're doing, I mean, it's a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
How many restaurants were in the Gables before Norman's came in?
Many. And they said, are you sure you want to compete with, all these other restaurants?
Right.
And the people who are my investors went, it's the Gables or nowhere. We're not investing in South Beach. We're not investing in North Miami Beach. We're investing in you, Coral Gables, in that order. They insisted to be called Norman's. I had other names in my mind,
Right.
but no. We want them to know that you're here and you're at the stove. And the way that restaurant worked is I had these 2 wood-burning ovens out that protruded into the dining room slightly, so I could quickly circle back in the main kitchen, but come back out into the wood-burning ovens area, and I could see the guests and go say a quick hello. So it was great.
How much did you wind up putting into that place?
Our build-out was $485,000.
Which by today's standards, it will even get you a 1,200 square foot.
Our rent was $8,000.
Wow. So you could actually make money. How
We
big
could.
was it?
Well, we branched out. We made a second edition. So the first iteration was 165 seats,
Right.
about 7,000 square feet, upstairs, downstairs. And then we took over what was an empty building next door and built a private party room with a show kitchen.
Right.
So we ended up with over 230 seats.
With an $8,000 rent?
Well, it went a little up because the second, the build out, but say $10,000.
But you can't even get something that's 1,000 square feet for that on Miracle Mile right now.
No. And I went back to Key West to do a big resort in 2006,
Right.
and saw how far everything had gone in the period of time since we lived there in the 80s as far as renting or buying anything. So it's,
What did Norman's Gables do for your street cred, so to say, and your artistic vision? Did you find that it kind of helped grow, that you were able to do things there that maybe you weren't able to in the other restaurants, or were at this point where you kind of okay, this is just another, high-end restaurant that...
No, I mean, I think everything was a lead up to Norman's.
Right.
Norman's became the full flower of where I wanted to get artistically, economically, which was always second to artistry for me. But I did get there, to the point where we could buy a house, where we could take a vacation, we could buy furniture, which in the early years, that wasn't a conversation.
Right.
No, when I think of Norman's and I think of the many people who came there and joined me on my teams, front, back, partnerships, the investors, all of that, that was, well, I mean, we can look at it like the first restaurant that the James Beard Foundation said, best new restaurant in America, came down to 5. We were one of the 5 in America. And this is when the Beard Foundation was believed as the Oscars, as it still is, the Oscars in the United States. I think, while it's great to win a Michelin or receive Michelin recognition, there's a lot of confusion over which one did you get. Bib Gourmand or 3 stars. There's a
Right.
world of difference between
Now
those
they have the
things.
green plate too.
They have the green plate too, and and there's also the matter of that Michelin doesn't come to an area unless they come financed.
Right.
Norman's also was the first restaurant and only restaurant to reach the final for best restaurant in America.
Right.
They actually sent the award notice to us in our 9th year of operation, and I had to tell them we're not eligible
Right.
because you have to be in business 10 years, and People were saying, don't tell him. I'm like, are you crazy? What am I going to do? Lie to the James Beard Foundation? No.
Right.
That'd be suicide. No.
But a lot of big chefs still say that was the defining moment in their careers is when they went to, a lot of them are from the Gables. So first time they went to Norman's, they really, I think for the first time saw what a machine like that looked like. And, I think, so what made you decide Orlando?
The Ritz-Carlton.
If you've ever heard of it, there's a hotel called the Ritz-Carlton.
Little hotel group.
Little hotel group, right?
Yeah, there was an epic night at Norman's. We were open both sides by this time, and it was a Saturday night. There were tickets up and down the board. I was expediting, and a guy who seemed to me about as tall as the drapes right here walked in the kitchen, said, "Chef, got a minute?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got all the time in the world. What can I do for you?" He goes, "This is a great restaurant." I said, "Would you come over here? Because I got to expedite and I can't hear you from all the way." He came over and he goes, "Yeah, we're finishing up the build out on the Ritz-Carlton Orlando. We run great hotels, but we don't run great restaurants. Would you consider coming up there and doing enormous at the Ritz-Carlton Orlando Grand Lakes?" And I'm like, "Sure, here's my card," thinking I would not hear from him again. He was just in Miami and having a good time.
Right.
He called the next day or the day after and said I wasn't kidding, and he wasn't. And so we flew up to Orlando with my business partner and Janet, and we took a look, and it was just the raw space. The hotel was almost done, raw space for the restaurant, and we said, stop the design. We don't want to do, anti-Ritz-Carlton version. We want to do something that's bespoke Florida. Let us go from here. Sure. We had to put in $100,000. And it was percentage rent. And whenever my contract was, whenever we came, sweet.
Right.
And you could go golf, you can get your hair cut for half price, whatever, massage, all of that. So we did that for 16 years. So that's why Orlando.
Right.
I couldn't. I wish my mom and my grandmother could have, walked in and seen that, because they would have just thought, boy, you did all right.
I think you actually did all right. I think, based on what you've done for me, every chef that, speaks about you and what you've done for the industry, thank you. Thank you for everything,
I love the community. I love the fact that I still get to participate and do the things that I do. Share in the charity events. My nonprofit, our nonprofit in Orlando is branching out. We're reaching more families, feeding more families, teaching them how to cook. But it's great, Felix. Janet and I will go to a neighborhood place in town on a Monday or a Thursday, and then somebody will say, "Chef, you don't know me, but I know you. I know your work. I know the restaurants. I went to your restaurant when I was in high school," or something like that. And I love the fact that I'm here and able to get that transmission of love and consideration.
Nice. Well, listen, thank you for everything you do. But before you go, got one question for you. So, Norman Van Aken, who are the 5 most important culinary people in your life?
In no order.
No order. Past, present, future.
Past, present, future. Jacques Pepin just did his 90th birthday celebration, and I've been invited to be part of the foundation now to help with education programs. Continues to teach out of his home, 90 years old. Such a leader, such a mentor, an example of humanity. He's an artist, he's a memoirist, he's everything that you would want to see in a person culinary. A person who came along through their work in a very big way for me is Chef Roger Verger, Moulin de Mougins in France. The reason that his work stood out from the other 3-star restaurant chefs like Bocuse, Sanderans, Gerard, those folks, all fantastic, all huge teachers. But Verger went to North Africa, and his cuisine took an exotic twist, and it made me feel like there was room for me doing things that were outside the French paradigm at an early point in my life.
So we got 2.
We got two. Charlie. Charlie is the most generous to me in terms of brotherhood and soul. He wrote to me more than any human being ever wrote to me. He was so incredibly gracious and generous to me. When like there was that period of time when I didn't have a restaurant, from 93 to 95,
Right.
when Charlie didn't let my name drop in the discourse of American cuisine, when he would do dinners at his restaurant and made sure that I was one of the 7 or 8 of the chefs that would have included Thomas Keller, Jean-Louis Paladin, Marcus Samuelson. I mean, Charlie would do 5 of these a year, and with always a different load of chefs.
And we lost him way too early.
We lost Charlie. Yes. Yeah, there's the documentary, though, amazing. I learned a lot from Paula Wolfert. I touched on her books before. Not a chef, but she has such a strong love of the cuisines of different regions. Morocco, the cuisine of Southwest France. Her book, to me, that's a Bible. But I would say that even stronger in terms of something like that is Judy Rogers. Zuni Cafe was her restaurant. Her book, the Zuni Cafe Cookbook, probably my most. Any chef who's worth wanting to be a great chef should have that book and should definitely read it beginning to end. The preface, the knowledge that's there. Judy was an extraordinary person. She was, when she was a high school student, luck would have it, or fate or whatever, she was the exchange student coming from California to France, and she stayed at the home of the Trogros, the Jean Trogros and his wife. So she was eating this 3-star Michelin food at 17 years old, but she absorbed it. And she went on to create the iconic restaurant, and then she died from cancer. And so that was a huge influence on me. Not her death, of course, but a reminder to pay attention. But another person that nobody will know, but I think of her often as far as a teacher to me. Her name was Betty Howard. Betty was born in Key West in the Bahama Village, a black woman married to a cop who was the breakfast cook at the Pier House. When I was brought in I had been the chef of a restaurant down the street, but I was brought in as the breakfast person. But I took that job because I wanted in at the Pier House. And Betty was, in many ways, she was like Lou Gossett Jr.
Iron Eagle.
Here's why I chose her, even amongst these people that will be our household names in many houses, because Betty taught me something so fundamentally important. She taught me how to move. Don't waste movement. She could put out 100 breakfasts in the time I could put out 25. And she didn't look like she was working. She looked like she was having a good time.
Right.
And there's something in that physical brilliance about how she did things that allowed me to succeed at a time when I was struggling. So I have to take off my hat to Betty Howard.
That's incredible. And again, grateful for you sharing that with us. And I'm really looking forward to the next chapter of your book.
Well, let's see how that goes. I got one in mind.
I don't think you're done yet. So, we're going to have you on again. And I really just can't wait for in store. And again, thank you for everything that you've done for us, the culinary community, all my friend chefs, and, just keep doing what you're doing and keep putting out great books and, great dishes. And, but before you go, actually, one more question that somebody asked me to ask you was, what is your Mount Rushmore of your signature dishes?
That's interesting. Oh, God. I had this conversation with some of my crew. When my 21 crew and I tried to, when I did the thing in Key West, I wanted to take about 4 or 5 of them down there with me and, move to Key West with me, guys. Let's just make this all happen all over again. And we went to Louis' backyard and we sat outside on the deck, and it was a beautiful night. And there was like maybe 8 of us around the table having some drinks. And we didn't go there for dinner. It was just drinks. But it was a fascinating conversation because we got on this topic of the signature dishes of the restaurant and how they almost all had a different one, and they fought for the dish that they thought was the dish, the bomb, the most crazy delicious thing ever. I don't know if I can nail this all the way I'm going to think about this as we pull out of the driveway, go back home. I'll go, damn it, I should have thought that dish.
Well, I know big shout out to Debo. Me and him were talking about this yesterday, David Morales, who was part of Itamai and Chang Gang and them. But
I love those guys. See, those are another few people. Right. Yeah.
But me and him were like, I had the French toast with the foie gras, which I thought was one of the greatest things that I've ever had. And he's like, yeah, but he's like, I think that the conch chowder is, so like in your opinion, what was your?
Definitely both of those.
Right.
The Don Island French toast. And if I do come back on, or when you have me back on, I will tell you how that came out of a fever dream. The French toast, the Don Island French toast, the creamy crack conch chowder, which is not the red chowder at all.
Right.
I'd say the yuca stuffed crispy shrimp would be another one that's still on the menu.
The ceviche, the was the light of
the salsa of life.
The salsa of life.
That I wouldn't probably have thought of it, but you know what? I should, because I've done that dish for big events. It's one of those crowd pleasers, so that could be one. Oh, I have to say the pan-cooked filet of Key West Yellowtail, because it has been the consistently the best seller of all of the dishes. It represents typically 10% of the sales of the restaurant. Of the food, wine. I mean,
that's crazy. That's insane.
My partner said we should just put up a drive-through window and sell the yellowtail.
There you go.
Pork Havana would be another that many would step. I asked my former partner, Marcia, the other day, I said, do you still think about some of those dishes? She says, of course I do. I miss the Mongolian veal chop. And that was a big part of the restaurant for a while too. Now, but yeah.
There was also the conch with the passion fruit. Was it? I
have to tell you the pronunciation of this word is conch.
Sorry, the conch.
Don't worry, it looks like it should be conch,
right.
But the English language is kind of freaking crazy.
Yeah, I'm a gringo. And
keep your charm. That's
right.
What's important. I'm sure I've done many different iterations of conch, and will continue to do so. I love conch. I'll save that for another time. I'm probably forgetting one or two others that would be considered by others their favorite. But it's nice, that people remember them. I mean, they're like favorite songs of a band. Would you go see your favorite band, and if they didn't perform your favorite song, would you feel like that concert really wasn't quite all it could have been? So I get it. I understand. Right. I want to make them happy, as long as I've never prevented from doing the new things that I think about doing.
But I think that's also, some tastes you just never forget. And I think like some of those dishes, the fact that we're still talking about it, the fact that we still remember, I mean, that really, says a lot about the man who created them. So, again, thank you,
Yes. I love it. Charlie did a version of the French toast. Emerald did a version of the French toast. I'll run into somebody that goes, I do your French toast, but I do it with this. And I'm like, okay.
Right. But Norman, thank you so much for coming on. You're a gentleman. Pleasure. You're a legend. I'm so humble that you came through and we got to shoot the shit for a little bit, and look forward to having you on again.
You do your homework. You ask great questions. This is a beautiful setting, and congratulations on the people that you've had here already. I can't wait to watch the rest of the shows that I haven't seen and the ones that'll be coming along.
I appreciate you.